morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I am happy to report that movie news is really picking up. In fact, I had to cut a story today because there's just too much to discuss, and that's even with spinning out some topics into their own videos over on the main Beyond the Trailer channel. Look for a Joker video later today discussing what happened on Gotham last night. Very interesting indeed. But anyway, I'm sure some of you are like, oh, and by the way, the story that I cut, I will try to include in tomorrow's Morning Movie News. But I'm sure some of you are looking at the lineup here and you're going, why didn't you cut the Twilight story, right? I'm sure some of you are planning to skip the Twilight story. You might have already skipped it. And for those of you that did, that was a mistake, because even if you don't like Twilight, I think that you have to respect Stephenie Meyer. She's the author and she created the whole brand. You have to really respect her business acumen. I mean, this woman is incredibly savvy when it comes to her fan base, and she has proven that yet again today. It's the most recent news story, actually, that we're discussing, trending on Twitter this morning. And what she's done is, in honor of the 10th anniversary of Twilight, there's something to wrap your head around, right? Not the movies, the novels, but in honor of the 10th anniversary of that cash cow, she's generated another book. And, you know, it's a little bit similar to what E.L. James did with 50 Shades of Grey, where she decided to release a novel of the whole story from Christian Grey's perspective. And, you know, Stephenie Meyer is also injecting the male voice into her franchise as well, telling something from the male perspective. But it's not Edward or Jacob's perspective. She's done a gender swap, and she's made Bella Swan a guy, Beau, and then switched Edward and Jacob to female characters. She could have kept it all male or all female, and I think there would have been a very strong interest in that as well. You know, maybe we're not quite there yet in terms of the mainstream, but you can see all the movies coming out this year, you know, Caitlyn Jenner, and just, you know, I think a lot of progress is being made, and perhaps we will get to a point, maybe for Twilight's 15th or 20th anniversary, where she can do that version of the franchise and expect to get the kind of returns I think she's likely going to get with this gender swap. Now, gender swap is something that's very popular with the fan base that I think Twilight ties into. Some of you might not be aware of how popular gender swapping is. It hasn't really made its way over to like the comic book video game, you know, fandom. But with like stuff like Disney fandom in particular, it's super popular. With the Disney princesses, it's huge. For instance, Frozen. So it's like kind of like a new kind of phenomenon, I believe. Not like super new, but it's just, you know, gaining momentum with that particular fan base. And I think it's only a matter of time before it, you know, jumps the barrier into someone else's fandom. So keep an eye out for it. But I think, again, Twilight ties very heavily into who likes gender swapping right now. So doing that with Twilight, I think, is absolutely genius. And, you know, they said there was just going to be like a couple chapters to just like be a treat for fans, but she ended up writing an entire book. You know, it's a little bit like J.K. Rowling, who's been very smart in finding ways to extend the Harry Potter universe, but also in ways that keep her creatively challenged and, you know, doesn't seem repetitive for the fans. And I think this is in line with that. Like, if you had said to me, how do you extend the Twilight franchise? I would have been like, I don't know, Renesmee maybe? But I never would have thought of this. I think this is absolutely genius. Now, they said, oh, do you want a movie? Do you think this will be a movie, Stephenie Meyer? And right now she's like, oh, I want, like, I guess she wants Grace Kelly for her female version of Edward. And she's like, but of course Grace Kelly can't be in the film. But I think that's just her hedging her bets. I mean, if not a movie, maybe a television show or a web series, right? I think Twilight, the fact that this could trend so highly when it was announced shows there's still a tremendous fan base for this material, and I think that this could really work out well. And I'm curious, if you're a fan of the Twilight movies, what do you think of the gender swap idea? And if you're not a fan, does this maybe pique your interest a little bit? And I'm very curious. She said it didn't change much. You know, it's still a romance, and I'm curious, you know, we're talking a lot about gender identity, gender roles, what roles, you know, men and women are supposed to play, not just if they want to swap genders or change genders, but also just how they conduct themselves and interact with, you know, the other gender or the same gender. So I think that this is like one of those first steps, and this is part of the road to getting to that 15th or 20th anniversary Twilight that's all one gender maybe, or, you know, explores, there's, you know, I think there's a little bit of interest in people that can switch genders, you know, and, you know, go back and forth, all the way back from Shakespeare's Orlando. So Very interesting. You can see this has some pretty, deep roots in terms of society's consciousness, and that Stephenie Meyer is an absolute genius. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, again, if you skipped the first story of the day, you made a mistake because it was a little bit of a business lesson in understanding your fan base, and also educating you as to a fan base you might not be aware of. All right, so anyway, maybe you just can't sit through a Twilight news story no matter what, and I can't hold that against you. But let's talk about some stuff I know you guys want to talk about, and that's DC Comics movies. We had two very interesting developments yesterday. The Lex Luthor article in Fortune magazine got a lot of attention. And also, as one of you tweeted me, they started a Lex Luthor Twitter account, Alexander Luthor. It should be authenticated. I don't know if it's a fan who started it. I don't think it is, because I think if it had been a fan, they would have went to town with tweets, right? Right now, there's just a tweet to the Fortune article. So I guess it's the official one, so go check that out. I'll put it in the video description. You might want to follow that. But of course, Lex Luthor, being someone from the tech sector, would of course have a Twitter account. But it's very clever marketing. I would have wished it had been a video story so we could have seen a little bit of LexCorp instead and seen what was being discussed. I want to see the LexCorp vegan food truck, right? I don't want to just hear about it. But basically, Fortune magazine wrote a tiny little article. It would have been great if it had been like a really in-depth Vanity Fair type article, but I guess they didn't want to put too much effort into it. But the real joy of it was how many Easter eggs they dropped in the coverage. So it didn't really warrant a spin-off, its own episode, because I think it was a little light on, what to get excited about and, actual reveals. But I think it's definitely worth discussing here on Morning Movie News. Now, what I liked about it, one of the things I liked the most, was how it hinted at the expanded empire, and also that it tried to make Lex Luthor seem like a real person, which I think is really cool. I think comic book movies are very successful when they're able to cross over into reality and not seem so fanciful. I think that's why Christopher Nolan found so much success with his Batman films, and I think that that's something that DC should really work towards, and I'm glad that they are. I think it's one of those things that distinguishes them from Marvel. Marvel still creates like a fantasy version of the real world, even though I think Joss Whedon is trying to inject a lot of normalcy into the MCU. I feel that it still feels like someplace else, right? That's even though it uses real cities, but that's but not real Eastern European countries. But anyway, DC Comics, I think this is very smart kind of marketing. It's the kind of marketing I really appreciate. Also, I love the business aspects to the DC Comics universe, right? I love Wayne Enterprises. I love Bruce Wayne. I got more excited about the Bruce Wayne Clark Kent Empire magazine cover than I did the Batman Superman magazine cover. I really want to see secret identities explored and utilized to their fullest extent, or else why have them? But anyway, one of the things I liked about the Lex Luthor article, besides all the little fun things like he has a meteorite collection, etc., was that they talked about that his competitors, his only competitor in the tech sector is apparently Wayne Enterprises, but because LexCorp is willing to go with military contracts, they're a little bit ahead of Wayne Enterprises, which won't do that. So I thought that was very interesting. That's ripped right out of so many comics and the animated series. It's always been a big divide between Wayne Enterprises and LexCorp, right? So I thought that was great. But I also like that they mentioned Cord Industries, which of course is Ted Cord, which of course is the Blue Beetle, which they've been saying is going to be a movie that Greg Berlanti, who oversees the DC shows on CW, might be writing. It'll be a Blue Beetle Flash Gordon team-up movie. I don't know how that's going to do, but clearly they are laying the seeds for it. I would love to see more Easter eggs, planting the seeds. I would love to see more Easter eggs for the rest of the DC universe in the movies. For instance, there was a rumor that there was going to be a newspaper with the headline, in Man of Steel, Pilot Steve Trevor missing at sea. I thought that was fantastic, and I was really disappointed when it wasn't in the movie. So I would love to see more like that, to hint at a greater universe, and to really, I think that would also make people watch these movies multiple times. Not just because the scenes are cool and the action sequences are really well done, but because you want to uncover different things. And also, it's just fun to imagine and think of it. Really, it's like brain exercises. I think it's a really great way to take your fandom for a run, right? So I really liked it. So I think that, and also Jesse Eisenberg's been going around talking about how scary he thinks his Lex Luthor is. And that would be wonderful. I would love to see a truly terrifying Lex Luthor, perhaps because of his ideology. I think that would be very, very interesting. And when you think today of someone like Donald Trump running for president, and some people find that a very scary idea that could actually become a reality, you find the line between art and life becoming very, very thin. So fascinating. You know, I talk about that a little bit in my Joker episode later today. It's the same thing about the thin line between art and life. And it seems to come up a lot in DC movies and DC content, which is, you know, really impressive for them. But anyway, I'm curious, I have a link down below, not only to the Twitter account, but also to the Fortune article. I'm curious, what do you think of it? Do you think it's good advertising? Are you coming around a little bit on this Lex Luthor? And what do you think of DC trying to be so realistic in the way their characters are depicted? All right, so the third story of the day is a little bit of, I think, a misstep for DC, and I think considering the fact that it has to do with the Flash, it could be quite the tumble indeed when you're going at that kind of speed. So Phil Lord and Chris Miller were working very heavily to create the Flash character for the films, right? They have a very successful TV show, so it's a little bit difficult for them. It's a delicate issue. So Phil Lord and Chris Miller, comedic geniuses, 21 Jump Street movies, the Lego movies, even Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball films were really funny. You know, they're very talented, and this seems like something that's right up their alley. However, unfortunately, Disney came over and distracted them with this shiny object, which is a Han Solo origin movie, basically, and they were like, we have to make that. So, and who can blame them? So that put Warner Brothers in a really difficult position where they were like, we need someone to direct this movie now, and it needs to be someone who can handle something that's very comedic, but also fits with Ezra Miller, who's been cast as the Flash. Ezra Miller is a very specific talent. He really is like a young Tim Curry. I think he's incredibly talented, but he's a very out of left field choice for the Flash. So you need someone who's going to make that work. And apparently Warner Brothers feels that Seth Grahame-Smith, the writer of the novels Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, novels that were very popular and are becoming movies. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter has already hit theaters and didn't do well. And then, of course, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies hits theaters in 2016. Now, one of you tweeted me last night that he's a very good novelist. Now, I haven't read his novels, so I can't speak to that. But I've seen the movies that he's written screenplays for, and he's an absolute hack. And I was very sad to see that he's a writer on the Lego Batman movie, which I've been very excited about with Will Arnett. But now hearing that Seth Grahame-Smith is working on it, now I'm worried that it's going to be absolute crap. For instance, he worked on the Dark Shadows screenplay. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of content this guy turns out. You know what? And I've said this many times, just because you're good in writing, just because you're a good writer on one medium doesn't mean you can hop to another. It takes a lot of time to learn the rhythm and the tricks of writing in specific mediums. And by that I mean novels, comic books, television, movies. These are all very specific categories. And just because you excel at writing in one of them doesn't mean you can easily jump to another, even though Hollywood often believes this to be the case. And this is sometimes why, you know, there's crap that's put out there. Not just because, and, you know, sometimes it's for lack of effort, but sometimes it's because of this, you know, people not realizing this. And it's something that is very important for anyone to realize. Know your depths and your weaknesses, and, you know, that doesn't mean they can't be overcome, but if you don't recognize them, how can you hope to overcome them? So I think he's an absolute horrible choice, and I think that Warner Brothers should be worried already, because when it was announced that he was in talks to direct this, nobody talked about it on Twitter. It did not trend. I know some of you it trended in your own personal circles, but make sure that you have your Twitter settings set to nationwide trending or global trending, so you really get an idea of what people are talking about. Otherwise, it's just going to be what you and your circle of contacts or the people you follow are talking about, and it won't be a true reflection of what's going on in you know, pop culture. So I think it's a horrible choice. If I were Ezra Miller's agent, I'd be trying to stop this any way that I could, and I can't believe that Seth Grahame-Smith continues to get work. I believe it's because he's writing that Lego Batman movie, and Warner Brothers feels that they're invested in him. They want him to be an in-house talent, but I would tell them to cut their losses, have someone look over all the work that he did, and say, go back to writing novels. That's clearly your strong point. All right, so we'll see. Maybe he'll surprise us, but I wouldn't hold my breath. All right, now on to the viewer question. Again, there's a lot to do today. I have a lot to cover, so I wanted to pick like a short and fun viewer question. And this comes from frequent BTT viewer and commenter, Mr. Pickle. And Mr. Pickle says, hey Grace, question. Do you think we will ever see the Red Hulk fight the Green Hulk in the movies? And to that I would say, Mr. Pickle, mark your calendar for like 2050 or 2020. Because, you know, actually 2020 is on Marvel's, you know, that seems so ridiculously far away, but Marvel's already slated movies for that year. So maybe 2025 or something. You know, eventually that Universal contract will run out, or they'll be able to negotiate their way out of it, you know, Disney, and they'll be able to either make a Marvel Hulk solo movie, or as I said, they could backdoor the character, make him a supporting character in someone else's movie. I suggested a Black Widow film, and then they can get around the Universal situation and, you know, explore the Hulk storylines that fans really want to see, from Planet Hulk to the Red Hulk situation. They'd have to find a way to bring back Betty Ross, or maybe Black Widow could be the Red She-Hulk, right? And it could play into her Russian background, I guess you could say. That would be pretty amusing. But I think that, yes, I think it could definitely happen. You know, it depends on how long Marvel can keep things going. So far, we don't see an end to this party. It seems to be going along very strongly. And they're eventually going to find their way to the Hulk character. I think what's holding the Hulk storylines back is that situation with Universal, which is very unfortunate. But I think that, you know, I wonder, it's a little bit like the Black Widow situation. How long are fans going to put up with a lack of that character being represented in the medium, right? I mean, it's very frustrating. I think Mark Ruffalo's depiction of that character is genius. I think what Joss Whedon introduced in terms of him always being angry was really, really smart. And it's a shame that no one's able to explore that further. I think Joss Whedon's done the best he can in the Avengers movies, and I hope that someone will continue. I think, because Joss Whedon was like, I had such a horrible experience on Avengers Age of Ultron, I'm out of here. I hope that his ideas, what he left on the table, isn't just left to fall away, right? I hope someone's like, I liked that. I want to pick that up and run with it. So hopefully, you know, and this is really, it relies on the people that come in to take over these movies. But you have a lot of really interesting out of left field choices, like we just talked about the new Thor 3 director yesterday. And so hopefully they're looking at this and they're considering it, right? Put him in an Ant-Man movie. Put him in something. It would be funny to have this giant Hulk in the tiny Ant-Man. I mean, there are lots of interesting ways they could go. And I think that Red Hulk is just, you know, and also, what do they want to do with William Hurt? That could also be very interesting. They're bringing back General Ross in a very strong way with Civil War, and they're looping him in, keeping him, you know, bringing him back. And of course, that being the Red Hulk's alter ego, I think that increases the chances of you seeing him sooner rather than later. But Marvel has so many characters to get to that it really is a balancing act to make sure that they bring in fresh blood, new blood, because that always excites fans, but they don't keep doing it at a rate that doesn't allow them to fully flesh out the characters they've already introduced, because that's just going to become frustrating for fans as well. And they only explore these characters in movies. Some of you have said, I would love to see this stuff explored on television, on Netflix maybe. So maybe they could maybe do a Netflix show, which is, you know, wouldn't be so embarrassing for the actors in the movies to appear in, you know, like the main actors, right? You know, some people have guested on S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's always like the like the third rate, the second of the second tier actors that do it. Sorry, Jamie Alexander. You know, but I think that, you know, maybe some kind of anthology series that's like one-offs, you know, that just tells like maybe little side stories. That could be very interesting as well. They're just going to have to figure something out to keep up with demand, but still maintain some kind of artistic integrity for both the talent that's working on these films and the characters that they're depicting. But anyway, that's today's Morning Movie News. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, even that Twilight story. Please write down what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.